Every great series tends to have that one black sheep. For Final Fantasy, that sheep is Final Fantasy VIII. Released in 1999 right after the cultural juggernaut that was Final Fantasy VII, it sold incredibly well but quickly gained a reputation as the weird one. But here's the thing, 8 isn't just a messy follow-up, it's bold, experimental, and one of the most fascinating entries in the series. If anything, its biggest crime is daring to be different. Final Fantasy VII had turned the franchise into a global phenomenon. It wasn't just a successful RPG, it was the game that put JRPGs on the Western map. It sold over 10 million copies, and suddenly Square went from niche to mainstream. So when Square began work on Final Fantasy VIII in late 1997, expectations were impossible. But rather than going the safe route and copying 7, the dev team, led by Yoshinori Kitase as director and Katsushige Nojima as writer, took a sharp left turn. They wanted something more grounded. Tetsuya Nomura redesigned the cast with realistic proportions, ditching the cartoonish look of 7's blocky characters. This wasn't a world of exaggerated anime figures, it was Square pushing the PlayStation towards realism, making characters look closer to the jaw-dropping FMVs that wowed players. Thematically, they wanted a game built around love. Where 7 was about trauma and rebellion, 8 would be about people and relationships. Gameplay-wise, battle designer Hiroyuki Ito didn't want to rehash materia. He created the controversial junction system, the draw mechanic, and level scaling enemies, ideas meant to reward strategy and add more freedom. The junction system is unlike anything I personally have ever seen in a game, and it took me quite a while to wrap my head around it when I first played this game literally a couple of months ago, but more on that later. Square was flush with cash from 7's success, so they poured resources into FMVs. The opening cinematic of Final Fantasy VIII is regarded by many as one of the series' best. Epic shots amplified by this incredible track called Liberi Fatali, a song that is regarded as one of the best in the series. Square was flexing, saying, "This is the future of cinematic gaming." Sadly, I can't play any of the soundtracks here because Square is very much against anyone using their music. Damn shame. The studio's ambitions with making FF8 feel different came at a cost. By chasing realism, romance, and new systems, Square alienated players who just wanted another 7. Instead of a spiky-haired eco-rebel and an evil super-villain dream boy, they got Squall, an introverted teenager, some might say a little emo boy, and a story about sorceresses, memory loss, and political intrigue. One of the biggest complaints about 8 is its story. People call it confusing, melodramatic, and even nonsensical at times. And yes, there are parts that feel messy. The whole time compression thing, the orphanage twist where everyone suddenly remembers they grew up together, it's a lot. Me personally, I like a good mindfuck. I like some weirdness in my games. Final Fantasy VIII isn't meant to be a straightforward hero's journey. It's a coming-of-age story told through the lens of a war. Squall isn't Cloud 2.0. He's an insecure, closed-off kid who learns how to open up. His arc is subtle but powerful. He goes from whatever to literally holding the fate of the world in his hands because he learns to care about people. And then there's the romance. Final Fantasy VIII is the only mainline game that commits so fully to a love story. Squall and Renoa's relationship is the emotional backbone of the entire narrative. Whether you think it's cheesy or not, it's rare to see a JRPG actually center around romance as much as this one does. Even the weird parts of the story fit into the game thematically. Memory and identity are recurring motifs. The Guardian Forces, the Summons Junction, literally cause memory loss to the characters by occupying a large portion of their brains. The characters are not just fighting evil, but also the fragility of their own pasts. The story may come off as messy sometimes, but it's thematically ambitious in a way most RPGs never even attempt. Now, let's talk about gameplay. The single biggest reason Final Fantasy VIII gets trashed: the draw system. Instead of buying or naturally gaining magic, you draw it from enemies or draw points. People hated this because they thought it meant sitting there spamming draw 100 times just to stock up on Firaga. That sounds tedious, but here's the trick most players miss. You're not supposed to grind draw like a maniac. The real magic of 8 is the junction system. Spells aren't primarily meant to be cast, they're stat boosts. You slot a quantity of Firaga onto strength and Curaga onto HP, and suddenly Squall becomes a tank. Also, there's abilities abilities that let you refine items into spells, so you eventually won't have to draw anything anymore. This system allows not only for a tremendous amount of customization, but also offers flexibility on different ways of playing the game. And then there's the level scaling. Enemies get stronger as you do, which flips the usual RPG mindset on its head. People don't like this at all. Oblivion was scolded for that multiple times. Grinding can actually make the game harder. The idea is to rely on junctions and strategy instead of brute force. Of course, Square didn't exactly explain this well, even the in-game tutorial is very easy to misunderstand, so for many players the system felt confusing and punishing. But once you get it, 8 turns into a playground of customization. Want to break the game? You can. Want to finish it at low level with busted stats? Totally doable. Advisable, really. And even though the junction system has a steep learning curve, it gives FF8 a unique identity. FF8 also experimented with other mechanics. Limit breaks weren't just low HP desperation moves, you could manipulate them with aura spells, letting characters perform these moves more frequently. Then there's the triple triad game, which oh boy, this is really addictive. It's addictive enough to be its own spin-off, I kid you not. This might actually be one of my favorite mini-games ever. It's fantastic. In hindsight, it wasn't that Final Fantasy VIII's gameplay was bad. It was different. Too different for players who just wanted the comfort of 7's materia system. But even if you set aside the story and systems, 8 really shines in terms of atmosphere and mood, particularly in its cutscenes. The FMVs in this game are absolutely jaw-dropping. What's crazy is that in a lot of those cutscenes, you actually keep control over your characters, further adding to the immersion. I was kind of blown away by this, considering this is PlayStation 1 we're talking about here. Final Fantasy VIII really was ahead of its time, and it's also 100% unique within its own genre to this day. So why is it so underappreciated? Well, it's not really. There's a wide fan base claiming that FF8 is their favorite game in the series. But what FF8 did was breaking the rules. Just like Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine are different from each other, and a lot of people don't like Sunshine, but it had some bold design choices in it, and some people also still claim that it's their favorite. Final Fantasy VIII came after one of the most influential games ever made, and Square, instead of doubling down on what worked, it zagged when everyone expected it to zig. Players wanted another epic, straightforward hero versus villain tale, but instead they got a love story wrapped in a political drama. They wanted an easy-to-grasp system, but what they got was one of the most unconventional RPG mechanics ever designed. In other words, Final Fantasy VIII was a very bold move. It wasn't built to be instantly accessible. It was built to be chewed on, debated, even argued over. And while that made it divisive, it also makes it unforgettable. Today, when you go back to Final Fantasy VIII, you see how daring it was. In an era where games are often afraid to alienate anyone, including Square's own recent games, it's refreshing to revisit a title that was so unafraid to confuse you, frustrate you, and then reward you when it all clicks. So, is Final Fantasy VIII still worth playing today? The answer is, it depends. If you're a fan of old school RPGs, particularly from the PS1 era, i.e. if you loved the original FF7 or FF9, definitely try to get into the game. Even if you tried it in the past and never finished it, I would give it another shot. But take your time with it. This is a game that wants you to spend time with it and learn its ins and outs. Otherwise, it will confuse you. And then on the other hand, if you don't like old school, perhaps rather dated feeling games, which of course is subjective what to classify as dated, then you can try this game of course, but you will probably have your frustrations with it. There's the PS1 version, the original PC version, which a lot of people recommend playing with certain mods, or the remastered version, which is the one I chose for my first playthrough, which some people get kind of angry about. I simply chose this version because it allows you to fast forward the game whenever you don't feel like sitting through some of the more tedious or quote-unquote dated parts, like the notoriously long summon attack animations. But whatever version you decide to play, I think overall, if you want a great, intimate story, if you want a lot of freedom in customizing your party's builds and abilities, if you want incredible cinematics and unbelievably good music, you can't go wrong with the black sheep in the family. Final Fantasy VIII isn't perfect, but perfection isn't the point. It's messy, it's experimental, and it's deeply human. It's the kind of game that lingers in your memory, not just because of what it does well, but because of the risks it takes. So the next time people argue about which mainline Final Fantasy deserves more credit, don't sleep on Final Fantasy VIII. It may be the black sheep of the series, but sometimes the black sheep has the most interesting story to tell. That's about it. See you next time.